4 years ago, a 7 months pregnant woman pounded desperately on the locked iron security door of her burning home, screaming for her husband to open it. Through the flames, she saw him standing outside holding the key, his arm wrapped around another woman. He looked his pregnant wife dead in the eye as the fire engulfed the room behind her and whispered to the woman beside him, "By sunrise, she and that baby will be gone. We'll start fresh." And then he turned to walk away. The mistress smiled that night, thinking she'd won everything: the man, the $3 million in insurance money, the ring, and the perfect life that belonged to Eden Vale. But what they didn't know was that the fire didn't kill her. It forged her into something they should have feared. And now, for years later, she's back. Not as the soft, trusting wife they destroyed, but as the woman who will take back everything they stole from her. This is the story of how a dead woman rose from the ashes to destroy the people who burned her alive. Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. New York, London, maybe Canada, or Jamaica. We want to know. 3 weeks before the fire that should have killed her, Eden Vale stood in the kitchen of her modest waterfront apartment in South Boston, folding pastry dough while jazz played softly on the radio. Her apron stretched tight across her 7-month belly, and every few minutes she'd pause to rub the spot where the baby kicked. At 29 years old, Eden had built exactly the life she dreamed of. Small, yes. Humble, maybe. But it was hers. Her home bakery, Eden's Sweet Corner, had become beloved in the neighborhood. Every church gathering, every community potluck, every birthday party, they called her. Mrs. Patterson from down the street said Eden's cinnamon rolls could heal a broken heart. Mr. Morris claimed her apple tarts were heaven sent. She loved her community, and they loved her back. But more than anything, she loved her husband. Holden Pierce had swept into her life 6 years ago like a thunderstorm, all charm and big dreams. He'd been a housing developer back then, the kind of man who showed up at community meetings with architectural renderings and a smile that could disarm the toughest skeptic. He was tall, sharp-featured, with perfectly styled hair and eyes that seemed to calculate even as they warmed. When he smiled, he looked like he owned the world. When he talked about the future, about building something, about legacy, Eden believed every word. They got married at City Hall 2 years later. Nothing fancy. Eden wore a simple white dress. Holden wore the charcoal suit he'd bought for investor meetings. They honeymooned in Cape Cod for 3 days, walking on the beach, eating lobster rolls, making promises about the family they'd build together. "I'm going to give you everything," Holden had whispered to her on their wedding night. "A real home. Security. Our children will never want for anything." Eden had kissed him and said, "I don't need all that, baby. I just need you." But somewhere along the way, Holden changed. The night started ordinary. Eden lit a candle on the kitchen counter, vanilla bean, Holden's favorite, and set a pan of milk on the stove for hot chocolate. November in Boston was brutal, and the drafty apartment needed all the warmth it could get. She hummed along to Billie Holiday, one hand on her belly, feeling Jonah kick in steady rhythm like he was dancing too. Holden had texted earlier, working late. "Don't wait up." She'd stopped waiting up months ago. The signs had been there, of course. The late-night phone calls he'd take in the bathroom. The receipts for restaurants Eden had never been to. The way he'd started pronouncing her name like it was a chore, Eden, instead of the way he used to say it, soft and full of promise. And then there was Imogen Vale. No relation, Imogen always said with a practiced laugh, though she wore the name like a crown. Imogen was everything Eden wasn't. Polished, connected, the kind of woman who showed up in the society pages of the Boston Globe. She'd made herself indispensable to Holden's business, PR, fundraising, introductions to investors who wrote 7-figure checks. Her Instagram looked like a film set. Her laugh was famous at charity galas. Holden had stopped noticing Eden's small joys. He began to talk like a man auditioning for public office. Eden turned off the stove and walked into the nursery, where a paper crane hung from the curtain rod, a tiny promise for Jonah. Through the window, she could see the harbor lights twinkling and, in the distance, the glittering high-rises of downtown, where Holden spent most of his time now. She didn't smell the gas at first. It came slowly, a chemical sweetness that didn't belong. Eden's nose wrinkled. She walked back into the kitchen, frowning. The stove burners were off. The oven was off, but the smell was getting stronger. Her stomach twisted. She moved toward the front door, but her legs felt heavy, her head suddenly light. The apartment tilted. She reached for the wall to steady herself, and that's when she heard it, a soft hiss, like a snake in the walls. Gas leak. Panic shot through her. Eden stumbled toward the door, but her vision blurred. She grabbed the iron security gate, the one Holden had insisted they install for safety, and pulled. Locked. "Holden!" she screamed, pounding on the metal. "Holden, help me!" Through the decorative bars, she saw him. He stood on the front walkway, 15 feet away, his phone in his hand. And beside him, her arm looped through his, was Imogen. She wore a red dress that looked like blood under the streetlights. Her smile was sharp. Eden's heart stopped. "Holden, please." Eden's voice cracked, desperate. "The baby, Jonah, please, open the door." Holden looked at her, really looked at her. And for a moment, Eden thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or guilt. But then Imogen leaned in and whispered something in his ear, and whatever humanity had been there vanished. Holden turned away. By sunrise, Eden heard him say, his voice calm, almost bored, "She and that baby will be gone. We'll start fresh." Imogen laughed, a sound like crystal breaking, and then they walked away. The world became a tunnel of heat. Somewhere behind Eden, a spark found the gas. The explosion threw her backward, her body slamming into the kitchen table. Flames erupted, eating the walls, the ceiling, the curtains. The paper crane Jonah would never see burned first. Eden crawled toward the door, her lungs filling with smoke, her vision fading. Her last coherent thought was of Jonah, tiny, perfect, a life she'd never hold. And then darkness swallowed her whole. Rosa Alvarez was walking her dog when she saw the smoke. She'd been an EMT for 12 years before burnout sent her into early retirement at 38. Now she spent her nights walking Biscuit, a three-legged terrier she'd rescued from a highway median, along the quiet streets of South Boston. It was past 11, the neighborhood mostly asleep, when she saw the angry orange glow blooming 3 blocks away. Instinct took over. Rosa ran, Biscuit's leash still in her hand, her phone already dialing 911. But when she got close enough to see the address, something made her stop. The front gate was closed, locked, and there, barely visible through the smoke pouring from the shattered windows, was a woman's hand. Rosa didn't think. She kicked through the side window, wrapped her jacket around her arm, and climbed inside. The heat was ungodly. Smoke filled every inch of space. Rosa dropped to her knees, crawling, feeling her way through the wreckage. Behind a collapsed bookshelf, she found her, a young woman, 7 months pregnant, her skin blistered, her pulse barely a whisper. "Hold on," Rosa whispered, hauling Eden over her shoulder in a fireman's carry she hadn't used in years. "I've got you." She dragged Eden out through the window, across the lawn, and into her car. Sirens wailed in the distance. Rosa looked back at the house, now fully engulfed, and then at the woman dying in her passenger seat. She should call the police. She should wait for the ambulance. She should do everything by the book. But Rosa had spent 12 years pulling bodies out of wrecks and watching the system fail them. She'd seen too many cases where the victim got lost in paperwork while the guilty walked free. And something about this, the locked gate, the way the fire had started so fast, the smell of accelerant, told her this wasn't an accident. Rosa made a choice. She drove past the arriving fire trucks, past the gathering crowd, and straight to a small clinic in Quincy run by her old nursing school friend, Maria Santos. Maria didn't ask questions when Rosa carried the unconscious woman inside. She just got to work. For 3 days, Eden didn't wake. When she finally opened her eyes, she was in a farmhouse Rosa hadn't lived in since her mother died, a 2-story colonial in rural Massachusetts, far enough from Boston that no one would think to look, where Eden's voice was a rasp, her throat raw from smoke. "Safe," Rosa said, sitting beside the bed. "You're safe now." "My baby." Eden's hand flew to her belly, which was still round, still moving. Tears streamed down her face. "Jonah, he's alive," Rosa said gently. "You're both alive. But Eden, I need you to listen to me. The news is saying you died in that fire. They're planning your funeral." Eden stared at her, uncomprehending. "Your husband," Rosa continued, her voice hardening. "Holden Pierce. He's been on TV, crying about his tragic loss. He collected $3 million in life insurance 2 days ago." The words hit Eden like a second explosion. "He tried to kill me," Eden whispered. "He stood outside and watched me burn." Rosa nodded. "I know, and that's why we can't go to the police. Not yet. You have no proof, and he has all the power. If we surface now, he'll find a way to finish what he started." Eden closed her eyes, her hand pressing against her belly where Jonah kicked. Alive. They were both alive. "Then what do I do?" she asked. Rosa leaned forward. "We make you disappear, and when you're ready, we make him pay." The first month was agony. Eden's body had survived, but barely. Second-degree burns covered 30% of her skin. Her lungs had been scorched by smoke. The doctors Maria smuggled and said it was a miracle she and the baby had lived at all. Jonah was born 6 weeks later in that farmhouse, delivered by Maria's steady hands while Rosa held Eden through the contractions. He came out screaming, angry at the world, his tiny fists shaking. Eden wept when they placed him on her chest, wept for joy, for grief, for the fact that Holden would never know his son had survived. But the joy was temporary. Within days, reality crashed down. Eden couldn't care for a newborn while barely able to walk. Her hands shook. She had nightmares every time she closed her eyes. Holden's face through the flames, Imogen's laugh, the smell of gas. And Rosa's farmhouse, safe as it was, couldn't hide them forever. "We need to place him temporarily," Rosa said gently, 3 weeks after Jonah's birth. "Just until you're strong enough." "No." Eden's voice was fierce despite her weakness. "I won't lose him." "You're not losing him," Rosa insisted. "But Eden, you can barely hold him without your hands cramping. You pass out from panic attacks twice a day. He needs stability right now, and you need time to heal." The truth was a knife, but Eden knew Rosa was right. Through Maria's connections, Jonah was placed with a foster family in Cambridge, a kind couple, the Robinsons, who were told his mother was in recovery and would return when able. Eden was allowed supervised visits, always carefully orchestrated, always brief. Every time she left him, a piece of her died. But Rosa didn't let her wallow. "You want him back," Rosa said one morning, hauling Eden out of bed at dawn. "Then you work. You heal. You get strong. And you make sure Holden Pierce pays for what he did." Physical therapy became Eden's religion. At first, she could barely walk 10 steps without collapsing. Her lungs burned with every breath. The scars on her arms and shoulder pulled tight, limiting her movement. But Rosa was relentless. 20 steps, 50, 100, breathing exercises until Eden could inhale without wheezing. Strength training with resistance bands until she could lift Jonah without trembling. And then Iris Bellamy arrived. Iris was 67, a retired forensic architect who'd spent 40 years reading fires like poetry. She'd worked arson cases for the FBI, testified in hundreds of trials, and had a reputation for being impossible to fool. Rosa had tracked her down through old professional networks and begged her to help. "Show me the house," Iris said the day she arrived, spreading photos of Eden's burned apartment across the kitchen table. Eden's hands shook as she looked at them. "Gas line," Iris said, pointing. "Tampered with here. See the scorch pattern? Accelerant was used, probably gasoline poured along the baseboards. And this," she tapped a photo of the front gate. "Fresh scratches on the lock mechanism. Someone jimmied it shut from the outside." "Can we prove it?" Eden asked. "We can prove it was arson," Iris said. "Proving who did it is harder. But I could teach you how to look, how to read insurance filings, how to spot forged signatures, how to follow money trails." So Eden learned. She learned to parse documents, to understand building codes, to recognize the patterns arson leaves behind. She learned patience, strategy, the art of building a case one piece of evidence at a time. And every night, she looked at the photo of Jonah on her bedside table and made the same promise. "I will find you, and I will make them pay. 2 years after the fire, Eva Lorne appeared in the Boston professional scene like a ghost made solid. She had credentials, a master's degree in disaster mitigation from a small but legitimate online program, published articles in trade journals about fire prevention in low-income housing, a consulting business registered in Delaware with a clean website and professional testimonials. On paper, Eva Lorne was exactly what she claimed to be, an expert in community safety. In reality, she was Eden Vale rebuilt. Iris had taught her how to forge the identity, how to layer it with enough truth that it would survive even a background check. Rosa had funded it with money from a settlement she'd won years ago after being injured on the job. And Eden had done the rest, writing the articles, building the reputation, learning to speak with a consultant's practice calm. Her face had healed in some places and stayed marked in others. The scars on her left arm were visible when she wore short sleeves, a roadmap of survival she'd learned to explain away as a car accident. She'd cut her hair short, dyed it darker, and wore glasses she didn't need. She looked different enough that casual observers wouldn't recognize her, but familiar enough that if someone studied her closely, they might see echoes of the woman she'd been. Holden wouldn't be looking, though. Dead women didn't come back. Eden watched him from afar first. His mayoral campaign had been announced 8 months earlier at a waterfront ballroom. Imogen at his side in a dress that probably cost more than Eden's old monthly rent. He'd given a speech about housing reform, fire safety, and the personal tragedy that had shaped his commitment to protecting families. "I lost my wife and unborn son to a preventable tragedy," he'd said, his voice breaking just enough to seem genuine. "Every day, I carry that loss. But I've turned my grief into purpose. As your mayor, I will make sure no family suffers what mine did." The audience had applauded. Eden had watched from the live stream, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood. Now, 2 years later, she was ready to walk back into his world. Her first public appearance was at a community forum on affordable housing in Dorchester. Eden, as Eva, sat in the audience, taking notes, asking smart questions about sprinkler requirements and building codes. Afterward, she approached the organizer and offered her consulting services for free. "I'm building my practice," she said with a professional smile. "I'd love to help." Word spread. Eva Lorne became a familiar name in community development circles. She wrote op-eds for the Boston Globe about fire prevention. She gave a TEDx talk about trauma-informed disaster response. She built a reputation as someone who cared, someone who understood both the technical and human sides of tragedy. And when Holden's campaign announced a new initiative, Pierce Housing Forward, a program to retrofit old buildings with modern safety systems, Eva Lorne applied to be a volunteer consultant. She was accepted immediately. "Ms. Lorne," Holden said when they first met at a campaign office in Back Bay, extending his hand. "I've read your work. Impressive stuff." Eden shook his hand, her expression neutral, professional. Inside, her heart was screaming. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce," she said. "I'm honored to contribute." He didn't recognize her. Why would he? Dead women didn't shake hands and talk about smoke detector placement. Imogen was there too, watching from across the room, her eyes sharp. She studied Eva for a long moment, something calculating in her gaze. "Have we met?" Imogen asked, approaching with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't think so," Eden said smoothly. "I'd remember." Imogen's smile tightened. "Of course." That night, Eden stood in her apartment, a modest studio in Jamaica Plain, nothing like the home she'd lost, and stared at the photo of Jonah she kept hidden in a drawer. He was 4 now. She'd seen him twice from a distance, always at public events where the Robinsons brought him. He had Holden's eyes and her smile. He drew pictures of pirates and sang off-key. "Soon," she whispered to the photo. "I promise. Soon." Working inside Holden's campaign was like walking through a house she'd once lived in, now occupied by strangers. The office was in a renovated brownstone in the South End, all exposed brick and modern furniture. Campaign staffers rushed between desks, phones ringing, volunteers stuffing envelopes. Holden held court in the corner office, visible through glass walls, always in meetings, always performing. Eden, as Eva, was given a small desk near the policy team. Her job was to review housing proposals, flag safety concerns, and draft position papers on fire prevention. She was good at it. Better than good. Within weeks, staffers were coming to her with questions, and Holden started inviting her to strategy meetings. Eva's got a real talent for translating technical stuff into human language, he told his communications director during one meeting. Let's get her in front of the press more. Eden kept her face neutral. Happy to help however I can. Imogen attended most meetings, always positioned near Holden, always watching. She'd ask Eva pointed questions about her background, her credentials, where she'd worked before Boston. Eden answered smoothly, every lie rehearsed until it felt like truth. But Imogen's suspicion lingered. Eden could feel it like a hand on the back of her neck. 3 months into her volunteer work, Eden saw Jonah. It was at a campaign event in Cambridge, a community barbecue meant to showcase Holden's connection to working families. Eden had been assigned to man the information table, handing out flyers about the housing initiative. And then she saw him. Jonah was holding Mrs. Robinson's hand, his blonde hair catching the sunlight, his face sticky with cotton candy. He wore a Red Sox t-shirt and light-up sneakers. He was laughing at something Mr. Robinson said, his whole body shaking with joy. Eden's world stopped. She gripped the edge of the table, her vision swimming. For years since she'd held him as a newborn, since she'd whispered promises into his tiny ear. And now here he was alive, real, so close she could run to him in 10 steps. But she couldn't. If she ran to him now, if she revealed herself before she had proof of what Holden had done, she'd lose him forever. Holden would use his power to bury her, to paint her as unstable, to make sure she never got near Jonah again. She forced herself to breathe, to smile at the family approaching her table, to hand out flyers like her heart wasn't shattering. Jonah drifted closer, pulled by the balloons tied to the table. He looked up at Eden with curious eyes, Holden's eyes, and said, "Can I have a balloon?" Eden's voice caught. "Of course, sweetheart." She handed him a red balloon, their fingers brushing for half a second. He smelled like sunscreen and sugar. He grinned and ran back to the Robinsons. Mrs. Robinson glanced at Eden and smiled apologetically. "Sorry, he's obsessed with balloons." "No problem," Eden managed. "He's adorable." "Thank you. We're fostering him," Mrs. Robinson said, a note of sadness in her voice. "His mother passed away before he was born, but we're hoping to adopt soon." The lie hit Eden like a fist. Holden had told them she was dead. He'd erased her completely. "That's wonderful," Eden said, her voice hollow. "He's lucky to have you." She watched them walk away, Jonah's balloon bobbing above his head. That night, Eden sat in her apartment and cried until she couldn't breathe. Rosa found her on the floor, shaking, and held her until the sobs subsided. "I saw him," Eden whispered. "He's so big, and he doesn't know me." "He will," Rosa said fiercely. "When this is over, he will. But you have to finish what you started." Eden nodded, wiping her eyes. She pulled out her laptop and opened the file Iris had helped her build, a growing dossier of evidence. It was time to tighten the noose. The evidence came together slowly, like a puzzle assembled in the dark. Iris had taught Eden to follow the money, so that's where she started. $3 million in life insurance, paid out to Holden Pierce 6 weeks after Eden's supposed death. The policy had been taken out 8 months before the fire, right around the time Holden started spending long evenings with Imogen. "That's suspicious," Iris said, studying the documents Eden had pulled from public records. "But not enough for a conviction. We need to prove intent." So they dug deeper. Imogen had a business, IR Enterprises, a consulting firm registered in Boston. On paper, it provided PR and strategic advising. But when Iris pulled the financial records through a contact at the state's attorney office, a pattern emerged. IR Enterprises had received payments from Holden's real estate company every month for 2 years, always in amounts just under the reporting threshold for taxes. "Money laundering," Iris said, "or kickbacks. Either way, it's shady." But the real breakthrough came from a name buried in Imogen's invoices: Silas Grant. Silas was a fixer, the kind of man who made problems disappear for people with money. He'd been investigated twice for arson for hire, but never convicted. His name appeared on 3 separate invoices from IR Enterprises in the months leading up to Eden's fire, always described as security consulting. "That's our link," Eden said, her hands trembling. "Imogen hired him. Holden paid her, and Silas set the fire." "We still need proof," Iris warned. "A good lawyer will argue coincidence." So Eden planted a seed. She drafted an anonymous tip and sent it to Marcus Webb, an investigative journalist at the Boston Herald known for his exposés on political corruption. The tip was carefully worded, just enough detail to make him curious, not enough to reveal her identity. "Look into Holden Pierce's life insurance payout. Ask why his wife's death was ruled accidental when the fire patterns suggest arson. And ask who Silas Grant is." 3 days later, Marcus published a preliminary article titled, "Questions Surround Tragic Fire That Shaped Mayoral Candidate's Campaign." The article was cautious, hedged with phrases like alleged inconsistencies and sources say, but it was enough. Holden's campaign went into damage control mode. Imogen scheduled a press conference where Holden tearfully defended his grief and accused the media of exploiting his family's tragedy. But behind the scenes, Eden knew they were panicking, and panicked people made mistakes. The first mistake came 2 weeks later. Eden was leaving the campaign office late one evening, walking through the parking garage beneath the building, when she noticed a man following her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black jacket and moving with the deliberate pace of someone who didn't want to be shaken off. Eden's pulse spiked. She quickened her steps, angling toward the stairwell exit. The man closed the distance. "Eva Lorne," he called out, his voice rough. "Someone wants a word." Eden spun, her hand already reaching for the pepper spray Rosa had insisted she carry. But before the man could get within arm's reach, another figure stepped out from behind a parked car. "Rosa, touch her, and I break your arm," Rosa said calmly, a tire iron in her hand. The man hesitated, recalculating. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, swore under his breath, and backed away. "You've been warned," he said, pointing at Eden. "Drop it." He disappeared into the shadows. Eden's legs nearly gave out. Rosa caught her, steadying her. "You okay?" "They know," Eden whispered. "They know I'm digging." Rosa's jaw tightened. "Good. Let them sweat. But from now on, you don't go anywhere alone." That night, Eden and Iris reviewed security footage Rosa had pulled from the garage. They got a clear shot of the man's face and ran it through a database. "Silas Grant. They sent their fixer after you," Iris said, her voice grim. "That's not just a warning. That's a confession." Eden stared at the photo, her fear hardening into resolve. "Then let's make sure it's the last mistake they make." The fundraiser was held at the Intercontinental Boston, a glass tower overlooking the waterfront. 500 guests in evening wear, a jazz band, an open bar, and enough political power in one room to move legislation. Holden's campaign had billed it as the event of the season, a final push before Election Day. Eden arrived in a borrowed black dress, her hair styled, her scars carefully covered with makeup. She wore Eva Lorne-like armor. Inside, the ballroom glittered. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes. Holden stood near the stage, shaking hands, his smile wide and practiced. Imogen hovered nearby, radiant in red, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Eden moved through the crowd, blending in, listening to conversations. Donors bragged about their checks. Campaign staffers gossiped about internal polls. No one noticed her. And then she saw Jonah. He was near the dessert table, clutching Mrs. Robinson's hand, his eyes wide as he stared at the tower of cupcakes. He wore a tiny suit, too big in the shoulders, and his hair had been combed flat, though one stubborn cowlick stuck up in the back. Eden's heart stopped. She'd known he might be here. The Robinsons were friendly with Holden's campaign. They'd been invited as part of the community family narrative. But seeing him in person again, so close, was a punch to the chest. She moved closer, her hands shaking. Jonah picked up a cupcake, inspected it, then took a huge bite that left frosting on his nose. He giggled. "Careful, buddy," Mr. Robinson said, laughing. "You're going to get it all over your suit." Eden stopped 3 feet away, close enough to hear his voice, close enough to see the dimple in his left cheek, her dimple. Jonah looked up and met her eyes. For a heartbeat, Eden thought he recognized her. Something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, maybe, or a memory too deep to name. But then Mrs. Robinson said, "Come on, sweetheart, let's go find your seat." And Jonah trotted away, still clutching his cupcake. Eden stood frozen, her chest so tight she couldn't breathe. A hand touched her shoulder. She spun, half expecting Silas or one of Holden's people, but it was Marcus Webb, the journalist. He wore an ill-fitting suit and held a notebook. "Ms. Lorne," he said quietly, "we need to talk." He pulled her into a side hallway, away from the crowd. "I've been digging into the fire," Marcus said, his voice low, "and I found something. Silas Grant was paid $20,000 by IR Enterprises the week before Edenvale died. But here's the thing. IR Enterprises is owned by Imogen Vale, and she and Pierce have been funneling money through shell companies for years." Eden's pulse raced. "Can you prove it?" "Not yet, but I'm close. If I can get one of them on record, if I can get them to slip." "I can help with that," Eden said. Marcus studied her. "Who are you, really?" Eden hesitated, then said, "Someone who lost everything to them, and someone who's going to make sure they lose everything too." Before Marcus could respond, the lights dimmed. Holden took the stage. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice booming through the speakers. 5 years ago, I lost my wife and son in a tragedy that changed my life. But from that pain, I found purpose." Eden watched from the doorway, her hands clenched. And then, across the ballroom, Imogen's gaze landed on her. Their eyes met. Imogen's expression shifted. Recognition, suspicion, and something darker. She pulled out her phone and typed something quickly. Eden's phone buzzed. "An unknown number. I know who you are. Leave now, or I'll make sure you disappear permanently." Eden looked up. Imogen smiled coldly from across the room. The trap was closing. Eden didn't leave. Instead, she walked straight toward Imogen, her heart pounding, but her face calm. The crowd parted as she moved, and when she reached the edge of the stage area, Holden was just finishing his speech. "And that's why I'm asking for your support," he said, his voice swelling with manufactured emotion. "Together, we can build a Boston where no family suffers what mine did." The applause was thunderous. Eden waited until it faded, then stepped forward. "Mr. Pierce, can I ask you a question?" Heads turned. Holden's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then reset. "Of course, Ms. Lorne. You talk about your wife's death as a preventable tragedy," Eden said, her voice steady and loud enough to carry. "But the fire marshal's report had inconsistencies. The gas line had been tampered with. The door was locked from the outside. Did you ever wonder if it wasn't an accident?" The room went silent. Holden's expression hardened. "That's an incredibly insensitive question." "Is it?" Eden pressed. "Because I've been reviewing the case, and I found something interesting. $3 million in life insurance. A policy taken out 8 months before the fire. And payments from your company to IR Enterprises, Imogen's company, including $20,000 to a man named Silas Grant, a known arson specialist." Imogen moved toward the stage, her face pale. Security removed this woman. But Marcus Webb stepped forward, his phone recording. "I'm a journalist with the Boston Herald. I'd like to hear Mr. Pierce's response." Holden's mask cracked. "This is absurd. I love my wife. Did you?" Eden's voice was colder now. "Because I have a witness who saw you standing outside the house while it burned. Who heard you say, 'By sunrise, she and that baby will be gone.'" Holden's eyes widened. For the first time, he looked at Eden, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, horror. "Eden," he whispered. The room erupted. Imogen lunged toward Eden, but Rosa appeared from the crowd, blocking her. Security guards rushed forward, but Marcus was already broadcasting live on his phone, and other guests were recording. "You're supposed to be dead," Holden said, his voice shaking. "I was supposed to be," Eden said. "But I survived, and I've spent 4 years gathering proof that you tried to murder me and our son for insurance money." She pulled a flash drive from her purse and held it up. Financial records, phone logs, a recorded conversation with Silas Grant where he admits Imogen paid him to start the fire. It's all here. Police sirens wailed outside. Iris had called them 10 minutes earlier, timing it perfectly. Holden backed away, his hands raised. This is insane. You can't prove anything. Actually, Marcus said, stepping forward with his phone. You just confessed. On camera. You called her Eden. How would you know who she is unless you knew she survived? Holden's face went white. The police entered the ballroom, and Detective Sarah Brennan, whom Iris had been feeding information for weeks, walked straight to Holden. Holden Pierce, you're under arrest for attempted murder and insurance fraud. As the officers cuffed him, Holden looked at Eden one last time. You should have stayed dead. But I didn't, Eden said softly. And now you'll pay for trying. Imogen tried to run, but Rosa tackled her in the hallway. Within minutes, she was cuffed too, screaming about lawyers and persecution. Eden stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by chaos, her body shaking. Across the room, Jonah was crying, confused by the noise. Mrs. Robinson was holding him, trying to shield him. Eden wanted to run to him, but she knew it wasn't time yet. Soon, but not yet. The trial took 6 months. Holden's legal team tried everything, arguing Eden was an imposter, claiming the evidence was fabricated, painting her as mentally unstable. But Iris's forensic testimony was airtight. Silas Grant, offered immunity, testified that Imogen had paid him to tamper with the gas line and lock the door. The recordings Eden had made, including one where Holden admitted on a wire that he'd made a mistake leaving her alive, sealed the case. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. Holden was sentenced to 25 years. Imogen got 18. When the verdict was read, Eden sat in the back of the courtroom, Rosa on one side and Iris on the other. She didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She just exhaled for what felt like the first time in 4 years. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, shouting questions. Eden gave a short statement. I didn't survive to seek revenge. I survived because my son needed a mother. Everything I did was to make sure he'd grow up safe, knowing the truth. Justice isn't about tearing people down. It's about making sure the people who cause harm can't do it again. The cameras flashed. Eden walked away. The reunion with Jonah didn't happen overnight. The Robinsons were devastated by the truth. They'd loved Jonah and believed Holden's story. But they were kind people, and when Eden sat down with them and explained everything, they agreed to a gradual transition. It started with supervised visits. Eden would come to their house, play with Jonah, read him stories. At first, he called her Miss Eva, but slowly, over weeks, she told him her real name. Told him, in words a 5-year-old could understand, that she was his mommy and that she'd been away because of something bad that had happened, but that she was here now. Will you go away again? Jonah asked one afternoon, his small hand in hers. Never, Eden promised. I'm staying right here. 6 months after the trial, Eden was granted full custody. The first night Jonah slept in their new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Jamaica Plain with a view of the park. Eden lay beside his bed and watched him breathe. She thought about the woman she'd been before the fire. Small dreams, a bakery, late-night jazz. That woman was gone. But the woman who remained, scarred, forged in flame, rebuilt by her own will, she was stronger. A year later, Eden opened the Phoenix Center in South Boston. It was a nonprofit for survivors of domestic violence and arson, offering legal support, therapy, and vocational training. Rosa ran the outreach programs. Iris taught forensic classes to help survivors document abuse. And Eden, for the first time in years, felt like she had a purpose beyond survival. One evening, as she locked up the center, Jonah ran ahead to the car, laughing. Mom, can we get pizza? He called back. Sure, buddy, Eden said, smiling. Mom. The word still made her chest ache with gratitude. As they drove through the city, Jonah chatted about school, about a drawing he'd made of a dragon, about how he wanted to be a firefighter when he grew up. Eden listened, her hand resting on his small shoulder. She thought about Holden, locked in a cell, and Imogen, who'd lost everything. She thought about the fire that should have killed her, but instead remade her. And she thought about the promise she'd made to herself 4 years ago in a farmhouse bed, her son a photograph on a nightstand. I will find you. I will make them pay. She'd kept both promises. Now, finally, she could live.